welcome to the One Shot Patreon episode. I'm still here with Ben. He absolutely refuses to leave my house. We just finished wrapping up the Witcher one shot. What'd you think?
I loved it. I knew there'd be something big and strong you'd be sending.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, one-on-one, I can't just sit there and just take the hits.
Yes, yeah. Level 5 Blood Hunter, you are a absolute class cannon. So even with the Predator or the Werewolf evocation and the subclass, you're not built as a tank, you know? So what you did was very smart. And I got to speak to that because you're a goddamn DM. So I knew for a fact, I was writing this out and I was thinking, okay, I got to prepare like I'm the one playing. If I'm the one playing, what would I look for? Red herrings. Multiple red herrings. Make it a Striga. He knows what a Striga is. Let's make it a little bit more violent or less violent. Nah, that's too easy. Let's everyone say that it's a Striga, but then the one person you seem to ask turns out, oh, it's actually tall, it's super skinny, has long claws, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not a Striga at all.
So, I will admit, when you mentioned the well and looking down there, I'm just like, there isn't a cavern in there, because I remember fighting a wraith in The Witcher 3.
Yes, yeah.
At the bottom of a well, I'm just like, has he pulled inspiration from this?
Because both of us we've played The Witcher, right? And I love The Witcher 3. I remember that mission and I was like, okay, well, how do I bring parts of The Witcher into it so that it feels familiar? Because it's a one shot, right? I don't have weeks and weeks and weeks of preparing you into this world. I have to bring stuff that's super familiar. Rain, cobblestone, a place that's overrun with monsters. That's pretty much every village, town that you go into for Witcher 3. But then I was like, all right, what's a mission that works well with me here? There was a mission that you go into a farmland over some cattle. And then I'm pretty sure it turns out to be a griffin that you have to fight.
Oh, yes.
And I was like, oh, okay, let's see if I can get a griffin in here. And I was like, no, it takes too long to kill a griffin. But then the well, for sure, the well. Oof, you did, pardon the pun, you did very well. Okay, I've got a couple of questions that I prepared. Super subjective, open-ended. But yeah, what's been your favorite moment as a DM?
Ooh, as a DM. It's a tough one. There's been a few good moments. I think watching my players plan and just sitting back and just knowing in the back of my mind that they are going to throw that out the window the moment combat starts. And they're all being so serious. And then combat starts and...
To hell with that plan, yeah.
Seriously, they spend all this time planning everything out and they just forget about it. The moment it's just roll for initiative, it's
like, oh shit.
What were we supposed to do? Let's just run it.
Fire.
It's absolutely hilarious when they do things like that. The campaign that I'm currently playing, I did quite enjoy them. They went down to Dis, which is in the second layer of hell. I made them go all the way through the first layer.
Avernus?
Yeah, I didn't know this, but the stairwell's right near, mind blank, the dragon, the 5-headed dragon.
Oh, yeah.
Tiamat,
yeah.
One of their deities at the time was Tiamat.
Good lord.
And they decided, no, I don't want to go down that dark path. I want to change. So I made him do that right out the front of Tiamat's temple.
Commit sacrilege right out the holy gates. Good lord. Yeah, how did that go?
They ran down the stairs so quickly because Tiamat was going to, destroy them.
Yeah, more or less. Good lord. Yeah, because in Avernus, the main issue or the main bad guy that you're watching out for is that fallen angel, Zuriel. Yeah, so you wouldn't even think, oh, well, Tiamat's there as well. But then to coax them into committing sacrilege right outside her gate, that's good. I love that as a DM. I love that. It's like, you won't. Go on. No, you won't. Just egging them on. I love that. Yeah.
So they get to the city of Dis, and I've had one of my players has been wanting a Colosseum fight all campaign. This campaign's just about to finish up, and it's 2 years long.
Wow, yeah.
And he hadn't gotten it. So I finally gave it to him. And because they were in hell, I brought back some of the best of the bad guys.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I brought back some of the oldies. And yeah, they had an absolute fun time, except one of the baddies, because they reincarnated down there and they'd gotten stronger. They couldn't work out how to beat him, so they legged it.
Cool.
And that's what finished it.
Yeah, that's nice. I think it's always good to bring back old stuff, but as a DM, you realize that as players grow, the monsters have to grow, you know? You can't just give them the same bacon, egg, and cheese every time. It's like, oh, it's bacon, egg, and cheese, but this is sourdough. And you're like, oh, okay, that's a bit different. Still the same overall sandwich, just looks a little bit different now.
As the DM, I think they could have beaten him, but it would have been close.
Yeah.
And they may have lost a player where how they were handling. So I was actually really happy when they legged it.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard as a player. You just get tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And you just see, we've got to beat this monster.
Yep.
What do you mean running away is an option?
Yeah. Wait, disengage? That's an action I can take? Like, yeah, you don't have to be a rogue to do that. Yeah. You can just disengage if you wanted to. It's like, but that's bad? No, not at all. It's a valid option. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not going to win, just run, fight another day.
Yep.
But so many parties won't do that.
Nah. Well, it's more so you got to realize who is the voice for the party. Because if you can, as a DM, coax the voice of the party more often than not, they'll do whatever it is that you want them to do, which sounds super manipulative. That's part of being a DM. I mean, we'll get into a story about you, but if you can get them to understand that this is a good option or it's not a good option, then they can communicate that to the table really well on your behalf, rather than you just being like, no, that's a bad plan, let's not do that. It's like, no, let the characters decide. But you, leader, hey, come here. Probably not a good option. You'll probably die. Yeah. Sweet. I love when you can take time and, you know, finally give them the dessert at the end, because they've definitely earned it, especially after 2 years. They would have earned that for sure. Yeah, well, okay. How do you like to prepare for a session? Do you have multiple days that you like to sit down and prepare, or are you D&D's in an hour, let's just put some bullet points on paper? What kind of DM are you in terms of preparing?
So I have a big outline where I kind of want to take the story, but of course I don't color it in too much because it depends on each session. Is depending on what happens. And I usually make the plans at the end of each session. Trying to mostly color in 2 sessions ahead. And then you just alter things a little bit depending on what happens on the previous session. But usually I'll sit there and go, what if I do this? And then I'll think about it for a couple of days and go, maybe not. Maybe something like this. And I'll think about it, and then I'll finally put pen to paper probably 3 or 4 days out from the actual session itself. That way, basically, I've got all that time just to think of the general outline. And once I have the general outline, it takes me a couple of hours to write it up.
Yep. I think that's a brilliant way of doing it. I think instead of forcing yourself to write a novel every time you sit down, I've started doing this recently as well, where, I mean, you played in my first campaign. There was 55,000 years worth of lore, you know, and every question you asked, I had an answer for. But nowadays, I'm a little bit more, not liberal, but like looser in terms of how I construct the story. I have the overarching arc like you, but even preparing the session that we just did, for example, I was writing it and I was going, okay, now that I've gotten to the well and there are claw marks, how do I then progress the story? Well, okay, what would I do if I was a player? I'd most likely use the bucket to grab something from underneath, see if I can fish something, or let's see if he climbs down and grabs something out of it. If he grabs it, how do I then tie this into the rest of the story? Well, I can't just keep introducing new characters. Let's see if I can make a way that he progresses the story himself. So you could have gone anywhere with that. And I was like, that's a hard question. So I literally just put everything down, walked out, had dinner, came back, and I went, I think I figured it out. That brooch is going to be the exact same brooch that Yvonne was wearing, and that'll tie him back. And that's how I introduced the basilisk portion of this.
Although, when I saw that, I was just like, that old lady's gonna die.
Yeah. I mean, like, what time or in which, this is a tongue twister, in which Witcher have you seen an old hag that wasn't bad? Exactly.
Because the good ones usually turned out to be old, but look young.
Yep, 100%. And I don't trust that. So I would rather not toy with a hag. So I knew that if I brought a hag into this, you'd be like, oh, that's Witcher-like. I don't like you.
Where are your sisters? I'll kill them before I kill you.
Exactly. There's supposed to be 3 of you. Why is there only 1?
Your magic doesn't work if I kill your sisters first.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, one of you has an eye, and I need to find that eye. But I, much like you, plan very loosely, like 2 sessions ahead. But I always, instead of giving people the plot, I try very hard to create NPCs that people can interact with to further the plot. Like when you were at the well, you could have done anything. You could have looked in, you could have done it by yourself and just looked. But because you looked around and you were looking to interact with someone, that little girl was there. Little girl, pretty much fucking useless when it came to the well. But the little bits of information that you got were like, oh, okay, cool. That's informative. Everything else is hot trash. But some of this is informative. So it's a way of giving you more details to the story rather than just reading out like a descriptive text to you. So I always make sure that I put some sort of NPC that is an interactable character, not a unskippable cutscene. Have you got any questions for me at all?
Was there any other shops or anything I could have gone to that you had planned?
Okay. Short answer, yes. Long answer, no. Because I knew this is a one-shot, and I'm definitely guilty of over-preparing for stuff. So I had a couple of shops. There was a tanner, there was a blacksmith, and there was that farmer that you could have gone to, but the farmer was so loosely planned. If you had gone to the farmer, that's why I had Charlotte be like, oh, it's just open land. Anyone goes in there. There were 2 other shops. There was a tanner and there was a blacksmith. And I was going to play them as just general NPCs that don't really know too much about the town. So they're definitely interactable, but they weren't going to give you much. So you had to go back to the main NPCs anyways, rather than just pulling and pushing too much of the story. I was like, it's a one shot. I can't be this Play-Doh.
Yeah, I figured they probably wouldn't know too much because when I got the brooch, I'm thinking, do I go back to the pub just to double check something or just go straight for it? I'm just like, the pub owner probably doesn't know anything. I'm just going to head back to Charlotte.
Yeah, she's probably got more information about it. Yeah. Cool. Another question. What is your most memorable moment as a player?
Betraying the party.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, let's talk about betraying the party.
Well, in my defense, I wanted the whole party to join the side of green.
Not good. All right?
Let's not do the side of good. There's plenty more to be gained on the side of evil.
Yeah.
Let's just all join the side of evil.
Yep. I mean, let's give the people a bit of context, though. So, you played a dwarf cleric wizard, I'm pretty sure.
Yep. So mostly wizard, just a short dip into cleric just for a little bit of healing and armor.
The heavy armor was pivotal for you though, right?
Yeah, it's wizards, they've got low armor and low health. I wanted to at least mitigate one of those.
Yeah, exactly. At least with the armor, you were a little bit harder to touch, but people had to get real close to you in order to do anything.
Yeah, and I just kept misty stepping away all the time because I knew that I'd only take 2-3 hits and I'd be down.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, the higher levels we got, you had a little bit more of a buff before that even happened. But your character, I remember session 0 when we were sitting at the table, you being a person who's already played D&D, it was a table full of people that hadn't really dabbled in D&D before. You and I were the most experienced ones on the table. And you started coming up with a backstory, and I was like, all right, cool, let's riff on this. Like, so how do we make this play into the story that I've created? And the one thing that I got from your character in session 0 was, I think Grunmac wants power. And I went, bingo, I've got an in. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Well, every character I make, I do enjoy a good flaw.
Yeah, right? Who wants to be playing Superman all the time?
Yeah, you can if you've got max stats, then you haven't got something to overcome. You're sitting there winning all the time. There's no struggle, and I enjoy struggle as a player.
Yeah, I think
because there's no stakes.
Yep, exactly right. As a DM, for example, if you give your players a encounter that has literally nothing towards the story and it's basically just cannon fodder, they might feel good in the moment, but that can't keep happening, right? There has to be stakes to a battle, to an encounter. They can't just go around the village killing everyone they want. Like, come on, there has to be some sort of reason as to what you're doing. So a character without a flaw, I think, is just, for lack of a better term, really bad character design. But continuing with Grunmac Hammerstrike, you had an older brother who we won't name. No.
The perfect older brother.
The perfect older brother.
Which gives Grunmac an inferiority complex.
Exactly, yep.
Thus the desire for power and to outdo his older brother.
To lord that over him, essentially. Like, he was perfect build, perfect bone structure, perfect grades, highest class of clerics, a better wizard than most people, graduated very young from EAT. Like, he was picture perfect, you know? So I thought that would definitely feed into the inferiority complex a lot more. But then as a DM, throughout the entire campaign, 30 episode campaign, it wasn't until episode 29 that you did what you did, you little betrayer, you little Judas. But from session 1, I gave you the opportunity to join the bad guy. And you're like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm good. I am good. I'm objectively a good guy. But then I slowly started whittling you down and breaking you down throughout the campaign. Killing your uncle. Loved doing that.
I think as a character, that kind of broke Grunmac quite a bit.
Yeah? Okay, let's talk about that. Yeah, okay. What do you mean by that?
Well, I kind of felt at the time that it changed his alignment a bit more. He was starting to think a little bit more darker.
Yeah.
Because right up to that point, he was never lawful, let's face it. But I think I started him as chaotic good. And when that kind of happened, I'm just like, well, I think he's going to start thinking some more darker thoughts. So I kind of pulled him into true neutral and started playing him with that sort of a mindset because... He'd just gone through so much trauma, and he just didn't have this rosy view of the world anymore.
Yeah, because I've mentioned it on the other Patreon episodes as well, because people have asked questions about, what's my favorite moment. One of my favorite moments as a DM is when players act their character. And when you found out that your dad was put on trial for the murder of your uncle, at the table, you went, my dad wouldn't do that. And I went, dude, that's not your actual dad. It's like, I'm sorry. Can we just take a time out for a sec? Ben, that's not your dad, dude. But I was like, oh wow, he's so engrossed in this moment. Best moment for me as a DM. That, and when Hayden still had a counterspell left, broke me. Absolutely broke me. I was like, I taught you how to play, you little shit. How dare you? But receiving the news of your dad killing your uncle would have been rough. And then your brother shows up, your picture perfect brother, who takes over. Everything's happy now that he's there. Your mom's real happy that he's there. He's looking after you and everything that he can do. He's giving your friends gifts. They love your older brother. It's just feeding into this inferiority complex. And then having your brother be the reason for all of this, I knew it would push you just that little bit further. Your character, in my mind, I had it as your character has strived to be better than this. This is the bar, and the bar is your brother. What if now the bar was lowered significantly? What do you have to strive towards? Nothing. So I knew that I could take that away from you, but then you turning in the final moment, I did not see that happening. How do you recall that? Because I recall that as a DM. How do you recall that as a player?
Oh, as a player, it was, this is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. Yeah. It's kind of a case. I don't think Grunmac's coming back from this. Yeah. He's given him his heart and soul over to the dark side.
Yep, to fear, really.
But there was one thing he still cared in that world, and that was his friends and family. So he kind of still wanted to take them with him. He kind of wanted to have it all.
Have his cake and eat it too.
And I think, again, that would have, although I wasn't playing him at the time, I think that would have broken him further, the fact that his friends didn't see what he saw. He saw the world that was going to come to ruin, and he wanted to protect his family. He bring his friends along for this new opportunity, and they rejected him.
It's like that final moment where it's like, do you not understand that I did this for you? And they're like, yeah, but we don't like that you've made that decision. It's like, but I made the hard decision. You guys didn't need to. So why do you still hate me for it? And they're like, you're a bad guy. I'm the bad guy. All right, I guess I'm the bad guy. As a DM, having a player die, devastating for the table. But then having that player basically hand their character sheet and go, that's yours now. You get to do whatever it is you want to do. I went, oh, I'm going to love this. Because you had built such a brilliant character. And I thought, what's the first thing that a smart character like Grunmack's going to do? He's going to go find a dragon.
That dragon, we found a dragon egg right at the beginning of the campaign.
Yep.
It finally came into play.
Yep. And then I was like, okay, well, how do I make this even better? Well, what's more scary than an alive ancient dragon? A dead ancient dragon. So I made it a Draco Lich. Oh, the party, as soon as they heard that, they went, oh. And who's controlling it? It's Grunmack. Oh, fuck. God damn. Okay, yeah, guys. He's got 2 points of concentration. He's got fuck all armor. We're not going to touch him. And there's a dragon as well. Creating moments that are lasting are super important for me. But something that you did that a lot of the other players did to a certain extent was you, as a DM, obviously, but you would think outside of the game. And I loved when you started theorizing, especially with your wife. I loved that. That was insane for me.
Yeah, a particularly emotional session. I'd come home and I'm just like, honey, we're going to go do a Macca's run, and then I'm going to discuss with you everything that happened in the game. We're going to brainstorm what Judah's doing to us right now.
To us? Yeah, that makes me feel so fulfilled as a DM, right? It's the fact that I can get this game and bring it out to someone else, and they're also interested. I love that as a DM.
Oh, you did a fantastic job on that campaign.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. And then I think at some point I will edit the campaign summary, and then I'll put that up on the Patreon at some point so that people can actually read through it. But to put it into perspective, it was over 150, 180 hours worth of game time condensed into 96 something thousand words.
Oh yeah, you wrote down everything.
Yeah. Obviously, as you're running a campaign, you get better and better and better. And I've learned tips and tricks, like rolling for enemies, initiatives beforehand. Such a help. Sometimes pre-rolling damage, that helps. But I found that having a book that I'm actively writing down, because behind the screen, and I love DMing with a screen, behind the screen, if you're writing down notes, they don't know. The players don't know, but you're tracking everything. You're like, why did that guy say that? Why did Grunmack do what he just did there? I'm like, okay, so why couldn't I hit that player there? How do I make it so that the next enemy they encounter is going to challenge that? Not outright be a one-to-one negative, but how do I, as a DM, challenge that so they don't just go back to the same thing over and over and over again? Yeah, you guys created some of the coolest story arcs, though. I loved every moment of that campaign.
That's what's so fantastic about D&D as well. It's not just one person. Yes, the DM has the biggest contribution, but it is group storytelling.
Yeah.
And when you get a group that's not versing the DM, but but contributing, everyone's contributing to the story. Yeah. That's when you get some really good games.
Yeah, I think so. I think it all comes back to collaboration. If you're not being collaborative, especially it starts from being a DM. If it doesn't start from the DM, it won't go to the table. So if I do the voices and I'm just like, and then Yavanna goes, I found the brooch and it was silver and it was there. But like, yeah, sure, I'm giving you information and I'm creating the story and I'm telling you details. But it makes more sense if I do the voices for it, for example, or set the music, which obviously you can't do copyrighted music here. But setting the mood, right? Like having it be collaborative in sense like I'm role playing so that you feel more comfortable to role play with me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, instead of just forcing you to do it and then I'll react to you. It's like, no, you get to react to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Because, man, so many of our players on the table had their own little arcs, and all of their arcs came to some sort of completion at the end. Having backstories is so important for me as a DM. How do you feel about people who write backstories for their characters?
I think it's fantastic because it gives you something to plant into the world.
Yeah.
It also means that the player feels like what they've written about their character is meaningful and has an impact.
Yeah.
And that draws in a player deeper into the campaign, and that means everyone enjoys it more.
Yeah.
So I think an in-depth, you know, we're not talking about huge amount, just a summary.
Yeah.
That's under an A4 page.
Please and thank you. That's just as a PSA to everyone in the world. If at any point in time I have to flip a page for your backstory, I'm summarizing everything. I'm not reading through every detail. As a DM, I've got so much to do already. Mm-hmm. I'm not reading a novel about your backstory. Because you might die the first session.
That's always a possibility.
Yeah.
And I will say this, once you've lost your first character, losing characters actually doesn't mean as much. So you lean more into the danger as well.
Definitely.
And now that I've gotten to that point as a player, I enjoy it a lot more because I'm not preciously guarding my character. I'm just doing what my character would do.
Yep.
And if that is something that is just plain old dumb, just absolute stupidity,
Yeah.
well, that's what the character would do.
Exactly. That's how I've created his character. On that point, the first character that I had was Reuben, but the second character that I had was Jonah. I took Jonah on a 2.5-year course and took him from level 5 to level 15. Didn't die. He is the only one in the whole campaign. Everyone was on their second or third character. I was the only one that didn't die.
I can believe that. I've seen Jonah's build.
I had to take him off Reddit because they were like, this is a broken build. And I was like, you're right.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's so nice. I remember playing so safe, you know, thinking of everything and planning for everything. Being like, okay, I like playing in range, but if someone gets close to me, how do I get out of there without having to disengage because I want to use my bonus action for something else? I played it like that. And while I created an amazing story with that character, I definitely guarded him and like just babied him a bit too much. Mm-hmm. But then after that campaign, like I didn't finish that campaign, I moved. But after that campaign, I just thought, I'm just going to create a character and just make him silly. And then I made Gene Wrangler. Gotta love it. His full name is Eugene Wrangler, but I thought Gene Wrangler, that's pretty funny. Let's do that. And I just don't care about dying in terms of if my character dies, who cares? Does it further the plot? Cool. If it doesn't and it's just a meaningless death, I'm going to be a little bit annoyed, but ultimately I can just make a new character.
Yeah, meaningless deaths are no fun.
Yeah.
But that being said, it is, as a DM, it is very hard to actually kill players.
Very. Unless you outright go in and you're like, oh, okay, it's a level 5 party. Let's put a Tarrasque in there. Like, oh, why? Oh, because I want them to be scared of the world. There's other ways you can do that. Why are you going to throw a CR 30, creature at a level 5 party? Like, that makes no sense. Do something silly. Like, oh, here's a cavern, and if you miss the jump on the cavern, you fall for a lot of damage. It's like, oh, but I'm a wizard, and I don't have that much. I don't have any spells left, and I haven't got good strength. All right, jump. If you fail, you fall with a lot of damage. Like, oh, and then the party jumps in. They're like, oh, no, well, let's see if we can get him. Cool. Collaboration.
Yeah.
Avoided a meaningless death there. But if it's, oh, you're a level 5 wizard and you have no spells. Okay, cool. Tarrasque. It's like, oh, yeah, all right. I guess that's a TPK. Where does the story go from there?
Yeah. There's no reason to be throwing anything too strong.
No.
I mean, there are some monsters that are actually quite low CR that I don't, or I modify for players.
Yeah.
Because, the little dog things that are brains.
Yeah. I think, is it off of the, good Lord, off Baldur's Gate? They're in there, aren't they?
Yeah, they're in the movie and everything. They're little pets of the mind flayers.
Yes, that's
One bad roll and you lose your character.
Yep.
because what it does is it just teleports into your brain, eats your brain.
Yep.
You're dead.
Exactly. And
I don't like that.
No. You have to mitigate risk, but also make it so that it is a risk to fight this thing. Like a mind flayer is so crazy to fight, right? You and I definitely know how rough it is as a player to come across it, but especially as a DM to throw that to your players. It's like, deal with this. Like, that's hard. Because, I mean, going back a couple of points, every player that comes onto the table is used to a story where you play the main character. And now suddenly you're part of a party, and there's 3 or 4 other players there that are also pivotal to the story for this time. That can change. Just like you can die, and then you'll bring another character, and they become pivotal to the story. Things can change. In saying that, I'm not going to throw a, I don't know, Demogorgon. like a level 2 wizard. Oh, you're powerful. Here, a Demogorgon. As what? Like I'm something that this thing can throw? Like, come on, man. Yeah, I understand what you mean by that. I think
there should always be a chance, even if it's only a 5% chance for the party to beat whatever you throw at them.
Yeah.
As long as they're smart, they can win, or they've got to run and then plan and come back. But there should always be some sort of chance. If there's no chance of them winning, you don't throw it at them.
I mean, to go to the opposite of that, I can talk to you in a little bit more detail because we are, I don't want to say well-experienced DMs, but we've had a lot of experience being DMs. On the opposite of that, when you're creating an encounter, is there something you do in specific to make sure that you're not just being like one shot by the party or, one rounded by the party? Because let's say, obviously, you roll at the table for your initiative, bit rough. Just to straight off the bat mitigate that, I always roll beforehand. And I make sure that I don't re-roll till I get like a nat 20. If it's a middling roll, cool. That means that there are going to be people before and behind, but there's always a layer action regardless. I do that. Is there anything that you do at all?
If I think they're going to overwhelm something, or there's a possibility, what I do is I make the fight into stages.
Yeah, cool.
So what I started with, which is easy for beginner DMs, is what you can do is you have 1 or 2 groups of monsters you can bring in if the party's just doing too well.
Yeah.
Or you want to give them something a little bit tougher, but if you put it all at once, it will just wipe the party.
Yeah.
You just bring them in stages. Say, 3rd round, a whole bunch of monsters join the fight.
Yep.
That way they can fight a lot more tougher monsters, but it doesn't overwhelm them because they've still got the turn economy.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Using turn economy is fantastic. If you obviously want to overwhelm your party, having a party of 5 players and then running a 10 extra monster, it's a 2-to-1 ratio. If those monsters are cannon fodder and they're just, skeletons and they're a level 7 party, yeah, sure, they're going to get through that very quickly. But if all 10 of those monsters have, let's say, 50 HP, 10 times 50, that's 500 HP worth of damage that the party needs to complete before they move to the next stage, which is the bad guy. It just mathematically doesn't make sense, right?
I mean, there's certain things you can do if you want to throw that sort of HP. A while back, I had them fight on a canyon.
Yeah.
So the group was on one side. There was 3 bridges, and basically they were shooting at each other. And I gave them an opportunity to cut the bridge, so it would fall into the ravine when the monsters were on there. So you can give them other ways to eliminate monsters as well.
Brilliant. Typically, I don't run monster encounters that are stupidly hard for people. If it's definitely leading to an arc in a campaign, and there's obviously a story moment here, then I'll throw something ridiculously hard at people, within reason. But I hate, as a DM, having to pull out a Deus Ex Machina for people. I'm like, no, you got yourself into this mess. Here are the options, but you can get yourself out. Like, you can cut the bridge. I'm not going to cut the bridge for you. Something that I love doing to give the players a little bit more agency in the roles is, I've done this to you so many times, is I will go around the table, and each round, if I want more monsters, little cannon fodder to come through, I'll get you to roll a d4 or you to roll a d6. And you're like, oh, what's this for? I'm like, just roll a d6. And you roll a d6, and I'm like, all right, cool. You rolled a 4. 4 extra skeletons enter into combat. but I'll make them into a group, and I'll have them act as a group instead of, all 4 of them having their own initiative and running their own initiative. I'll just go, okay, this is the group. Instead of all 4 of them doing 1d4 damage for a dagger, I'm just going to say it's going to be a 1d8. I'm only going to roll once. Basically doubles it. So that gives me an even.
Yeah, you can run them as groups. It's the best way to run large combat.
I think they call them hordes, horde mentality. Just run that. It's way easier. Yeah.
Because I have been playing around with mechanics to run larger combat.
Yeah.
I think one of the ones that I ran for them had about 100 baddies on the field.
Wow. Yeah.
And basically they were in command of about 50 soldiers, and basically I just got them to, after they did the damage, I just basically got them to roll a d4, and that would be how many that they wiped out.
Yep. I think that's an excellent way of doing it. I think having more things happen in combat rather than just I roll, I attack, I roll, I attack, here's my damage. I was like, yeah, that's fine. What else could you be doing? Because when you're in a battle, right, it's not just linear battle. There's other things happening around you. Well, then as a DM, how do I make the surrounding interesting? Because it's not just you and Darth Maul fighting the Duel of Fates. It's not just that. Well, yeah, Duel of Fates, they were still... And I'm not great at Star Wars, so pardon my lack of knowledge. But in the Duel of Fates, I've watched that 100 times. They are skipping over bridges. There's large gaps that they need to cross over. There's more happening in the terrain that they need to navigate. It's not just an open, flat field, and they're fighting each other. That'd be boring. It wouldn't be the Duel of Fates. It'd be 2 guys fighting.
Yeah. It can't just be a HP slogfest.
No, sponges, dude. I hate sponges.
If your boss is looking for as a sponge, and I was looking at this, I can't remember whose short I was watching, but it was a really good. What you do is you just make your boss into 2 or 3 stages.
Yep.
So once they get to say they start with a couple hundred HP, because I'm running a campaign that's quite high level now. And basically, once they've killed it, it moves on to the next stage. It gets a whole new HP pool.
Yeah.
And the way that they attack completely changes.
Yep.
And it's made a lot more interesting. And it kind of... Because the problem with high-level D&D is it's a little bit unpredictable. There's just so many options, and you just don't know when your players are going to pull out a whammy and just completely derail everything. And you've got a couple of options. You can just create this huge amount of HP. Boring. So I was looking for a new solution, and that was it. You stage it. So you see it on video games all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. At each stage, the boss will change. They might throw a weapon away, or and change it, or they'll sprout wings and start flying.
Yep.
And then you can make it feel threatening. So you can actually make the first level very easy. And they'll relax, they'll chill, they're thinking, oh, we're having this great time with this boss. And then
false hope.
And then all of a sudden he's looking awful, and all of a sudden he grabs a gem or something and just crushes it and goes, this isn't over, and he just powers up, and it's a whole new ball game.
Grows 4 feet taller, and you're like, what the fuck is this?
and the players are just staring at you going, hey.
Wait a minute, you can't do that. I fucking can, I'm the DM.
You thought this was going to be easy, didn't you?
I am the god of this realm. That's it. But as you said that, that just gives me another little tip for anyone who's learning to become a DM. I always say, don't make everything from scratch. Don't do it. You are going to run into a wall of fatigue that is just impossible to get back out of, because you've thought, I need to do everything myself and make everything super creative and everything super unique, and I have to think of new mechanics and that. You can do that when you have a little bit more experience in your belt, but for now, if this is your first time running D&D, run a pre-written adventure. So much easier.
They're so easy.
They've done all the thinking for you, basically.
And once you're starting to get a little bit further, that's when you start to take a monster and you just change its damage type or change its HP. Or you're the wrong level for a monster, so you change how it interacts so it's more in line with the level that you want to run it at.
Absolutely.
Because, all the big monsters that I run, I actually start off with a stat block from somebody else.
Yep.
Those big monsters, I might, for the different stages, I might find 2 bosses that are fairly similar, and I'll just run them back to back. You just change the flavour.
Honestly, when I started off running elementals, for example, if I had an elemental fight and I'll go, oh, here's a fire elemental. Oh, wouldn't this be way cooler if this was like a cold elemental as well? Okay, well, how do I change the stacks to reflect a cold elemental instead? Like, well, hold on. Instead of doing all that work, just type up cold elemental D&D stat block and hundreds will show up.
That's what I love about 5e and why I'm so hesitant to move away from it to any other system at the moment. It's so established that there's so many resources.
Yep, absolutely.
There's websites where for $5 you can buy entire modules that somebody, a third party has written.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, the last Halloween and Christmas one-shots I've run, I just bought them and just modified them a little bit.
Yep, super easy. I mean, that's part of why I have made the Patreon so available. A shameless plug. But I've made the Patreon available because every episode of this podcast is a different one-shot. And I could just pull something from the internet and do it. But I was like, no, look, I've got so much experience as a DM. I can make these. But more specifically, I can tailor it to the person that's coming to the table. Like John was a pirate one-shot. He loves pirate stuff.
That he does.
I was like, yeah, cool. Callahan, I had him as a master chef because we got into a riffing thing where we were like, what if Gordon Ramsay would have been an orc raging the entire time? That makes sense as to why he's so angry, you know? Or like Heston Blumenthal. It makes sense that guy would be an artificer because he's always playing with liquid nitrogen. Like, it just makes sense, you know? But I love being really creative with D&D because I understand how it works now that I've done it for so much. But that's a piece of advice that I give to literally any person that wants to try being a DM. Don't do everything. You are the god of the world. Doesn't mean you have to create everything. Things are already created.
And it's very hard to memorize everything. For instance, Blood Hunters, I've never had a player run them.
Yep.
I've never run them myself. I had to do a ton of research in order to...
Umbra.
Oh yes,
on your
Umbra
campaign.
was
yeah. But I multi-classed, so it wasn't a true Blood Hunter.
And the other one that haven't really run, not many people play monks, so I haven't had a chance to really experience that. So I don't know their mechanics pretty well at all.
Yep.
Because I've never needed it.
Yep. The one class that I haven't run myself as a player is Sorcerer. I know how to do that as a DM. I've never run that as a player, though. I've never delved into the coffee locks and stuff like that. Like, I'd love, as a DM, I'm like, how do I use that to fuck with my players? But I've never, as a player, been like, how do I use this to mess with my DM? I've never gone that other way.
Well, that's the other advantage of actually trying to DM as well. You don't even have to run monsters.
Yep.
Some of the times I will run stat-blocked players.
Yep.
And it gives me a chance to experiment.
Yep.
That's why when I go to be a player, I can make these interesting characters.
Yep.
Because I've already partially fleshed them out in my own games as the DM.
100%. Peek behind the screen. The Blood Hunter you were fighting was Umbra.
Okay.
Yeah, so literally all it took was, because we were playing a level 7, I think. I dropped it down to a level 5 character. And I took out all the other multi-classes, and all I did was just a little bit of touching up here and there. I took it so that he became the werewolf invocation instead. I keep saying invocation. I'm pretty sure it's just subtype or archetype. But I like invocation. Sounds cooler. I went through the werewolf instead, and I was like, all right, cool. Let's make him a bit more feral because he is of the wolf class. Makes sense for him to be a werewolf. That's an option. Let's do it. But I could only do that because I've experienced that player before. I don't get this whole idea of you have to create everything for it to be unique. I'm like, well, certain things that I created for my campaign, or even the campaign that we're running now, the city, which we haven't done in a while, but the city, I did not have to create animosity. Certain things in literature and mythology are already created. Like the church hates vampires. Makes sense. Van Helsing. Let's do it. Let's go the Tabaxi absolutely hate the werewolves. Why? Dogs hate cats.
Exactly.
Vice versa.
It makes sense.
Exactly. So it's like you don't have to think of it being super creative, being like, okay, I need to have a Tabaxi. Okay, that's a cat. Let's get a GIF and let's make that the arch enemy. Why? Cats and dogs. Boil it down, and then you can flesh it out as you create the campaign. Boil it down, have a simple concept, and then have the players fill in the blank spaces.
Because you're drawing from real life, and that means that your players can link in what you're trying to get at a little bit quicker too.
Yeah.
Because that's the other problem. If you go too unique, your players aren't going to understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to spend a lot more time in campaign explaining everything so they're all caught up on how everything works. Whereas, as you said, cats hate dogs.
Yep.
It took very little for us to pick up on that.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, they're enemies. I'm like, yeah, they're enemies.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's go for it.
The fairies, right? The Fae. I had the Fae as, and you're part of the Fae. I had your faction as 1-for-1 nursery rhymes. Jack and the Beanstalk. Be Rabbit, right? Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. I was like, all right, cool. Let's just have his name as Jack Nimble. Let's do that. I had Alice in the Wonderland, the Looking Glass. But the Looking Glass was essentially like an anti-magic that you were looking through. So it would, uncover mysteries and whatnot instead of looking through the Looking Glass. But I just had to pull, literally the title of the second Alice in the Wonderland books is Through the Looking Glass. I was like, okay, cool. How do I make that into more of a D&D setting for me? Let's make it an object that's of immense value, hence Alice still has it. Or like, oh, let's have the Jabberwocky in her house, but let's disguise it as a Great Dane, Just pull it, but make it your own.
Yeah.
Make it your own. And you can, following a recipe online, you're not going to 1-for-1 create the recipe perfectly. You're going to add your own flavor. D&D. Full stop.
And that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's just making those few changes, because you're already drawing on something, everyone just is into it just that little bit quicker.
Yeah. And having to not explain every single detail to a person and having them formulate their own ideas that still make sense in game, that just means that your job as a DM is so much lighter.
And because they're engaged and getting into it, sometimes they'll come up with things you didn't expect. And you're just like, you know what? I was going to go with this direction, but I like that. So I'm going to take that. And I'm not going to tell you until probably another 2 or 3 sessions that is actually what's happening. Yeah. Because I now have to write that.
Yep. Because the idea is planted now and you got to go, how do I use this against them? Okay, that opens up a question. Is there a moment that you can think of where you did that as a DM? Without spoiling too much, because you're still running an active campaign.
Be a good one.
That's a tough question.
It is. Yeah. It is. Just trying to work out which one. You'll probably just have to edit all this.
No, you're fine. That's okay. Yeah.
I'll try and think of a more recent one, but one of my characters, it's... I haven't done this yet.
Okay.
But I will be using it against him.
Yeah. Don't worry. This is on a Patreon wall, so he's not going to listen to it. Yeah.
But he's a sleepwalker. He made his character a sleepwalker. I'm just like, we're going to go with that. So he rolls a d4 to see which direction he walks, and then if he runs into anything, he attacks it.
Cool. Okay.
Backfired the first time it happened because he killed a whole bunch of the monsters.
Sure.
He rolled really well. But before he gets a chance to move out of the group, next time he's going to fall asleep right in the middle of the group.
Bit more dangerous.
Yeah.
Way more dangerous. Yeah, because now he's unwillingly...
He will unwillingly attack them.
Wow. Cool. Yeah. Because it's like, here's a consequence of your incredibly powerful skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. Hilarious because and part of the reason why he attacks things in his sleep is he's had tons of trauma, so when he wakes up he screams.
Yeah, wow.
So sometimes he'll sit there in session and he'll just go, you talk amongst yourselves, I'm having a sleep. And then after a few minutes, he'll just scream.
Yeah.
And everyone at the table just goes quiet, looks at him and goes, oh, and then goes back to doing what they're doing.
This guy again, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I instantly can think of a couple where I've done that for most people. One of them was Callahan bringing green into the real world by exclaiming, I am afraid of you.
Oh, yes.
So I had to kill his character. And I talked in depth about that. And we can go into depth about that. But the moment that happened, I was like, okay, after this mission, you guys have to go back to school. You've brought him into reality now. Guess who's coming to school with you? When that happened, I went, okay, cool. Fear is only able to enter when you bring fear in. You guys were the vessel that brought fear in. And then the thing that I loved doing, I messed with your perception of time. Like walking into the Arcanon's office and then the door shutting behind you, you thought nothing of it. But then when you flashed back, you were walking up and you realized that someone had closed the door behind you and it wasn't Arcanon. I was like, okay, this is my in. Because I really wanted to have Arcanon be the kind of hostage that you have to then trade one of the players for. But I didn't know how to get there. Like I had that as something that I was like, okay, this is pivotal. This is going to change a lot of how these characters think. Because there's no moral gray in like sacrificing people for the greater good. Or is there? How do I get there? And then you had just lost Callahan's character, gone back to school, and then this happened. And I was like, okay, that is my in. I'm going to change what just happened. Alex gave me an opening. I'm going to make the entire party pay for it. In that moment, you nearly sacrificed your own life for the party. Again, they were willing to let it happen, but then Genesis stepped in. But that's another real big callback to the start of this episode, where it's like, I was willing to do that for you guys, and I'm still the bad guy? How? Explain that to me. How am I the bad guy? And it's that, I don't know, the fight that you have as a character. I don't like PvP. Hate PvP. I find that just breaks a party. It's supposed to be collaborative. So if you're going to have PvP as a DM, dude, why? Do you want your players to hate each other in real life? Well, then don't have PvP. But having you wrestle with your character on the table with all the other characters at the table, and then you're just like, you know what? Stuff this. I'm turning. And they just went, oh, God, we're dead. Because you had built such a good, fleshed out character. And then him turning just meant that they were now fighting you at a much higher level as a revenant. So it's like, here's a high-leveled mage who has a bit of cleric in it. He's got high-level spells, 2 concentrations that he can maintain at any point in time. Oh, and he's a revenant now. Deal with it. Love that.
Because the other thing is, often I would be the one to just find and break things as well.
Yeah.
So luckily, I half figured that. So that's part of the reason why I built the cleric, Estelle, after that.
Yeah. Very good.
Because although Estelle didn't have the attack power Grummack had, Estelle was very good at keeping everyone alive.
Yeah, yes, he was. Yeah. So he's like, okay, where Grunmack failed in thinking power was the one thing that would help his party, I'll go the exact opposite way. I'll be super defensive, and I'll just keep people alive. I don't have to attack. I just have to keep people alive.
And Estelle was a pure cleric, and if there was one thing he was very good at was just keeping everyone alive.
Yep.
You go down, 2 or 3 people could go down, and he would bring up everyone every round.
Yep. I mean, part of that came from your aura. Part of that came from your like AoE that you had. Your, I think, what was it? Is it a 10-foot radius? It's almost like an inverse of Spirit Guardians, where as long as they were within a certain spot, they would be healed at the start of the round or something.
Oh, I think it was 15.
Yeah, see,
ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
That's 3 squares.
And then I don't even have to attack myself, because if I wasn't going to use one of my concentration spells to help somebody, I could always put Sanctuary on myself, Spirit Guardians, and then I can just walk into combat with everyone else. And I don't attack, I just heal.
You are a walking ambulance. It's like, no, if anyone needs to go down, I can like defib you right back up, instead of just healing word, getting them back up, and then they get knocked back down. It's like, no. I've picked you back up. Stay close to me, and guaranteed you'll have more HP than when we started the fight.
Temporary hit
temp
points.
HP.
It's wonderful.
I love temp HP.
And as the DM, you've always got to know every player's weakness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it would have been pretty tough to take down Estelle, because being a cleric, they've got okay HP, and the type of cleric who was heavy armor.
I've always got ideas when it comes to how I would defend against certain characters, but that's just because I'm a paranoid person. And that's just how I play. For Estelle, my idea instantly, after I had him in a couple of encounters, I went, okay, what's the one thing he's good at? This guy's really powerful at keeping people up. Okay, well, how do we play to that? Next time I encounter him, all I need to do is find a way to neutralize him, not kill him, but neutralize him, either put him in a plane shift, a blink that's cast on him unwillingly. Let's see if he breaks that. I know that will be really hard, but this is the BBEG. I can modify a spell for him. Or how do I plane shift him? If not, how do I force cage him? Essentially take him out of the fight without removing his person.
I mean, that was the real weakness, is if he's not there, if he's on a different plane, or he can't move around. Because what I was always doing is moving him so that he could get the max number of players in his aura, and anyone out, I would then use my action in order to heal them.
Yeah.
But if he's stuck somewhere, all I can do is that one action, so I'm down to bringing one person up at a time.
Yeah. Which becomes a turn economy thing. So as long as you're above them, or you can get to them before their second death save, you have a chance. Because on their second death save, they throw a 1, you've got nothing.
I've got to wait until after combat to bring them back.
Exactly. So it's like, that's 10 rounds of combat for a minute to pass, but it's still, when you're fighting a boss, you don't know how many rounds it's going to be. I think I had a train of thought that I've absolutely lost now. But as a DM, running one-shots is so much fun for me because it lets me run ideas outside of a canon campaign, where I'm like, how does this actually work in a one-shot? Let's just play, like, no stakes really involved in this, and let's just play and let's see what happens. And then I find that's when I create the most mechanics. For example, you had the absolute pleasure of playing my Fever Dream. An absolute roguelike where you had to complete 5 consecutive rooms. You fail one of them, complete reset. No magic weapons, no nothing. Everything that you collected in each room resets. Was it 9 runs?
It took us 9 runs.
9 full runs. And I remember, I was like, okay, guys, it is getting late. If you guys want to go home, you can, and I won't take offense to this at all. And they're like, no. We're completing this.
Yeah, I had a couple of broken things up my sleeve.
Yeah.
But I needed us to get to at least the last room before I played them. Because I think it was the 9th run before we even got to the last room. And that's when I played them. Yeah. So I'd been holding them back for a couple of hours of play.
Yeah.
Waiting for that last room so I could use this move that I had up my sleeve just once.
Me. Yeah. It was a room where it was essentially just 3 consecutive checks. Means nothing for a high-level character. As long as their pluses are really high, especially if you're a rogue and you have jack of all trades, you're fine. It means nothing, this room. But the rest of your party needs to complete it. So I was like, okay, well, how do I make this interesting? You can maybe do 2 consecutive rolls back-to-back and be fine. If you have advantage, you're even better. But 2 flat rolls with just your basic modifiers, you're running a 50-50 there. You might even just fail your first roll, which means you're out of there. 3 consecutive rolls, that's hard. Statistically, much, much harder. How do I put that in there? I played it, and obviously Patty rolling his 3s, unlucky. But I use that and if you heard the pirate one-shot, I use that for the Galloway lock. So there's a lock that he needs to break with each phase becoming increasingly difficult. That happened because I had played the one-shot, the Fever Dream, and I had played that mechanic and been like, okay, I need to know how frustrating it is for a player so that I know how to modify it for a campaign or a one-shot episode, for example.
Oh, that's what one-shots are.
Yeah.
If I've got something that I think is a little bit iffy, I'll run it in a one-shot.
Yep. Best way to do it. Gene Wrangler, personally for me, the dumbest character I have. There's Gerard Way, who is named after the lead singer of My Chemical Romance. He's a bard. I ran it so that all of his spells were renamed to be My Chemical Romance songs. Like, the Black Parade was just my Horn of Valhalla, where I would call in technically a parade of people. So stupid, but it worked. Anyways, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sure I'll have you on at some point when you're not as busy as you are now. We'll wrap it up there. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you in the next episode.